Modern extremist violence is rarely just a military act. It's a calculated media spectacle designed to capture global attention and provoke a specific reaction. In the immediate aftermath, a familiar pressure builds as media outlets turn toward Muslim leaders, creating an urgent, instantaneous demand for answers. Scholars often respond to this pressure by diving into the archives, issuing complex theological rebuttals to prove that the perpetrator's actions have no basis in Islamic tradition. This creates a self-sustaining loop where public demand leads to religious defense, which in turn fixes the media's focus entirely on the role of faith, while the material causes of the violence go unexamined. Entering this debate on the extremists' chosen terms makes the theological defense the story itself, keeping the conversation trapped within the religious imaginary the groups seek to exploit. In 2014, 126 leading Sunni scholars launched a massive effort to break this cycle, publishing a comprehensive open letter to dismantle extremist ideology. Addressed to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the letter used Quranic verses and the Hadith to challenge his claim to the caliphate and his justifications for brutality. Despite its scholarly weight, the letter struggled to gain traction. It did not slow the group's recruitment, nor did it shift the prevailing Western media narrative that linked the faith itself to terror. The letter treated the group's actions as a theological error, rather than a modern communication strategy that weaponizes political grievances to reach its audience. Fighting on the battlefield of theology alone ignores the structural realities of the conflict, and it comes with massive, often hidden, strategic costs. We can weigh 3 religious rejections against their trade-offs. The substantive approach revokes their Muslim identity, but mirrors the extremists' own logic of excommunication. The consensus approach frames them as a deviant minority, but inadvertently reinforces the established elites the extremists claim are corrupt. By focusing on religious standing, these methods often inadvertently support the terrorist narrative, either by mimicking their logic or confirming their claims of elite bias. The ethical approach cites verses of mercy to counter extremist brutality. This presents a peaceful faith, but sidesteps the difficult historical texts extremists actually exploit. Treating war criminals merely as bad theologians fails to provide any practical geopolitical framework for stopping them. Attempting to solve a crisis driven by modern geopolitics with a theological band-aid leaves the actual root causes of the violence entirely unaddressed. A fourth option exists, shifting the focus from medieval zealotry to a geopolitical approach that analyzes these groups as modern political actors. These groups are thoroughly modern, utilizing Hollywood-style production, advanced weaponry, and professional internet recruitment to reach a global audience. Looking past the religious packaging, we see the real push and pull factors at play: social alienation, systemic poverty, and the fallout of foreign state violence. This requires an uncomfortable self-reflection, forcing us to acknowledge how Western foreign policy and regional instability contribute to the conditions these groups exploit. By focusing on the material and political conditions, we can begin to understand the structural drivers that allow these organizations to persist. We must recognize that spending all our time debating whether a group is truly Islamic only reinforces the assumption that the root of the problem is the religion itself. If we map responses by prioritizing theology versus material context, we see what dismantles propaganda. The substantive, consensus, and ethical approaches focus heavily on faith, remaining trapped. Prioritizing geopolitical context dismantles their narrative by addressing the world they actually inhabit. Debating scripture is a zero-sum game that serves both terrorists and their most vocal critics, all while obscuring the material truth of the conflict. For media and analysts, the goal should be to stop treating terrorists as theologians and start framing them as political actors utilizing modern propaganda. Shifting this frame means losing the sensational headlines of a clash of civilizations, but it provides a far more accurate assessment of the threat. For community leaders, the path forward is to stop accepting the burden of endless theological apologies and instead highlight the interconnectedness of global violence. Moving away from the role of the apologist may create friction with those demanding simple condemnations, but it is the only way to break the asymmetric loop. By refusing to fight on the theological battlefield and focusing instead on material reality, we strip extremists of their most powerful weapon, our misplaced attention.